Why isn't Impact Wrestling a competition for WWE? Well, let's compare the differences and the different eras, and let's compare the different perspectives. Okay, now when WWE and WCW was in competition, WCW had Ted Turner, WCW had Monday Nitro, and WCW basically stole the megastars from the WWE, like Kevin Nash, Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, Macho Man Randy Savage, Roddy Piper, Ric Flair. Well, Ric Flair was basically an NWA WCW guy to begin with. Lex Luger, the British Bulldog. But all the major stars that were in the early 90s in WWE, WCW stole. Which WCW did an excellent job of offering them great money and offering them great success. Which they did, most of them did. That went from WWE to WCW had great success. Like the NWO and Lex Luger, the British Bulldog. He was okay in WCW. He didn't have great success like he did in WWE, but he was okay in WCW. Kurt Hennig, that's another one. And then you look at Impact Wrestling. Impact Wrestling, pretty much the guys that was in WCW went to Impact. And Impact Wrestling mostly had Ring of Honor guys. They had independent wrestlers. Which, don't get me wrong, it's great to start new and fresh, but Impact Wrestling, they had Jeff Jarrett as the founder. They had Dixie Carter, which Dixie Carter did excellent. But to me, the problem was Impact. Okay, now you started the Asylum in TNA, NWA TNA. The Asylum was a great idea, first of all. I loved the Asylum in Nashville, Tennessee. They did excellent on that. And then they went to Orlando, Florida in the Impact Zone. Now that was a wonderful, excellent idea. And then they had TV time and Spike TV, which, again, another killer. And then they started getting stars from WWE, of course, which, don't get me wrong, they scored big with Kurt Angle, Mick Foley, Scott Steiner from WCW, Sting from WCW, Christian Cage. They scored big time on those stars. And Rhino, Raven, and then Sabu, the Dudleys, Booker T, Kevin Nash. I mean, they did excellent. And then they had, they was premiering in 2 hours in Impact. But the problem was, first of all, Hulk Hogan taking over the company. Don't get me wrong. I love Hulk Hogan to death. Hulk Hogan will go down as one of the greatest wrestling icons and legends of all time. Then they hired Eric Bischoff. Eric Bischoff, an excellent, a genius in the wrestling business. But the problem was WWE wanted, not WWE, but Impact Wrestling wanted that same thrill like WCW had. And I'm sorry, but you can't repeat somebody's destiny. You can't repeat somebody's legacy. Impact Wrestling tried to do that. Now, they didn't do it with, now, what they did different was they had the X Division, which they should have used the X Division a lot more, because the X Division was totally different from the Cruiserweight Division. The Cruiserweight Division, you had to be 230 pounds or less. But the X Division, it was no limits. You could be a 400 pounder and be an X Division champion. X Division was different. And then when Hulk Hogan and them, they wanted to, instead of be on TV Thursdays, they wanted to be on TV Mondays. Well, that didn't last too long. About 4 or 5 months. And I'm sorry, you just can't be in competition with Monday Night Raw. Nitro, WCW Monday Nitro is the closest competition that will ever compete with Monday Night Raw. Monday Night Raw just has the it factor. Monday Night Raw just has the magic touch. That was the first big problem. And then when they started bringing old stars, and don't no disrespect, I love Sean Morley, Orlando Jordan, Tara. Well, Victoria was there before the Hulk Hogan era in Impact Wrestling, but the Nasty Boys, that was a total failure in Impact Wrestling. Ric Flair, the Nature Boy. Rich, he was pretty good. He mentored a lot of people in the Impact Wrestling, so he did good. But at some point in time, you gotta let the young talent take over. And while they was focused and they had fortune in AJ Styles, Chris Daniels, James Storm, Beer Money, with Robert Roode and Kaz, and they had Eric Young and a bunch of other stars. But they should have used the stars like Bobby Lashley more, for sure. He should have definitely been used a lot more. Rhino was still pretty good, so they could use him a lot more. Just the young, it felt like when Hulk Hogan came in, it's just like the young guys were pushed to the side. Like, there was still some young guys that was wrestling and everything, but they wasn't getting in the proper respect and attention like they used to. All because you had stars like Scott Steiner, Ken Anderson, the Monster Abyss. You had those, the Dudleys. They was focusing on more on them than they was the young guys. And at some point, you have to let the young people come in and do their work. That right there was the ultimate letdown and the reason why the Impact Wrestling never could compete with WWE, because a lot of the older stars from WWE and New Japan and all that was getting more attention than the independent circuit guys. And that's why you see the independent circuit guys and the Impact Wrestling, most of them, on WWE now. And they still had a TV deal until 2014. And then when 2014 went to 2015 and Impact went to Pop TV, that was the beginning of the end for Impact. Because number one, nobody had Pop TV on regular cable. And number two, they was going on a time where really nobody pays attention unless you have satellite or in satellite TV or direct TV. So when you do those things of not letting the young guys come in and you let older guys, you give older guys the attention. Like I said, Scott Hall and Six Pack, Sean Waltman, I love those guys too, but they got the spotlights and everything also. But the last thing was whenever Impact went from Spike TV to Pop TV. That was the beginning of the end. And since then, really, Impact has not been the same. Now, Impact was good in 2015 and through 18, but really nobody paid attention because it went on cable TV and you could only watch it on limited access. But really, just the Impact in 2015-16, they started losing the guys that was there from the ground up to different companies like WWE and AEW. But Impact Wrestling is still on. But I mean, like I said, nobody's really paying attention to it. I mean, I want to say Impact would be the WCW of today, but I don't know, because AEW's on the TNT network and they've got the stars and everything. So AEW's like the WCW of today. Impact, I guess you would have to call them they're not really what you say hardcore. They got a couple hardcore men and women on there, but you can't really compare them to ECW, honestly. So I just don't know about Impact Wrestling. It may be a matter of time before they get off the air, but I mean, I hope they recover. I hope they do good. And then also when they had Jim Cornette done excellent in TNA and Global Force and whatever they call themselves. But Jim Cornette could only do so much. So I just think where they didn't put the much focus on the young, they didn't put the focus on the indies like they should have. That's one of the reasons why they failed tremendously and they're not in competition with WWE.